Hey, this is Patter Durkin, and I'm here with Nico Martins, and we're part of the Cosmic Tower project. And we wanted to um, provide a resource for you today, organized around the 8 essential principles for your EMF solution. And I just want to spend a word telling you about why we're doing that. You know, as part of the Cosmic Tower project, we are a hub of information, and people come to us all the time talking about EMF. It's become a really hot topic. And what we're noticing is that people are getting educated by businesses, and the businesses are just trying to sell their technology, and it's a bit of a mess. It feels like a jungle out there, and people get lost between looking at the benefits of a technology in the physical world and not understanding principles. And so this dialogue that we want to lead is one of sharing principles with you so that you can be empowered to know for yourself and to take the principles and apply them and say that principle makes sense to me. I want to make sure that's part of my EMF solution, or that doesn't. But we think these are the 8 things that you need to really focus yourself on, and we wanted to provide that as a resource to you. So yeah, Nico, thanks for joining me here today, and let's dive right into the conversation. So before we reveal the 8 principles and kind of discuss them, I think the most important part is to set the stage for understanding who a person is. Like, if I don't know who I am in a dialogue, how can I know what my principles are? And so if you could you talk a little bit about who we really are and contrast it a little bit with who we're acting as and who we think we are in this world?
Yeah, thank you, Patter. Absolutely. And let's start with what most of us know, and I'm going to talk about the levels of creation. Most of us, we're very familiar with the physical level of creation, the periodic table of elements, chemical processes. And then a lot of us are also familiar with what I like to call the subphysical plane, which is the electromagnetic spectrum, which we know as radiation. And all of this, the physical and the subphysical, is in the slower than light. But there is also a faster than the speed of light, which is the vital energy, the subtle planes. These are things that all the spiritual traditions we're very well familiar with. And also with the rise of quantum physics, we are becoming familiar with this faster than light realm. And this is what I would call the life force space. This is about the subtle vibrations. Now, every classical healing system is based on this subtle energy realm, with the exception of allopathic medicine, which only focuses on the physical, chemical level and claims that no energies exist beyond the physical or the chemical. So if we look at creation, we actually start in the faster than light realms. So we have the spiritual realm, the mental realm, the emotional, and then the vitality realm. Now, then this slows down into what we know the physical realm and animates our physical reality. And then this decays in the subphysical realm, which we know as the electromagnetic radiation. Now, as well, the electromagnetic radiation affects the subtle realm, the faster than light realm, and the other way around. But what is also true that are both the electromagnetic spectrum, the electromagnetic realm, and the subtle realm, they both govern and they affect our physical bodies. So that is the first thing that we need to do. We got to broaden our horizon to this faster than light realm, this metaphysical realm, this subtle realm. And many of us are aware of this in different ways, like the law of attraction, right? What you focus your thoughts on manifests. That's one indication. Another indication for those that might not be in the law of attraction, might not be very much into that, is that we know through hypnosis, through regression, that mental blockages and emotional blockages can lead to physical ailments. So that's all evidence that those realms that are more subtle actually govern the physical realm. And as we open that up, we have to take a completely different look at the whole EMF equation, right?
Right on. Yeah, we got to know a little bit of a difference of who we are, and then one of the things that comes right in after that is polarization, right? Like, I'm sure other people can relate to what I can relate to in myself. Like, I like to think I'm right. I like to think I'm on the side of good. There's good and bad, and I'm always seeing myself on the right side. And I've been at that for long enough now, and hanging around with people like you for long enough now that I'm getting that that's exhausting. And so the solutions that people are using, they're getting EMF meters, and then they're measuring with the EMF, and then they're blocking. So everybody, not everybody, but the majority of the focus of questions around EMF solutions are, how do I block it?
Yeah.
And I've been learning that that's not the path. So what's wrong with using an EMF meter and blocking something?
Because we're only focusing on the slower than light realm when we're focusing on electromagnetic. And I'm not here to say that electromagnetic and shielding yourself from it, that is not a right approach, but it's incomplete at best. So in order to give you an analogy to understand this better is, if we take a boat, for example, and you see a boat go through a canal or on the ocean, you have this initial wave, this initial pressure wave. We can compare that to the electromagnetic radiation. Now, what you also know is then for minutes later, you have all these small waves that are still there, and they spread out much further, and they actually stay around much longer. Now, if we have many boats that are going through a same canal, all these waves that are lingering, they start interacting with each other, and they start forming a standing wave, what we call, and we would refer to that as electro smog, right? So another analogy would be the rain falling down. It's the electromagnetic radiation. The fog that then lingers, that is like the electrosmog that is still around. And this is why, like this electrosmog, the lingering of the smaller waves after that, they're not electromagnetic in nature. So those cannot be measured with an EMF meter. That is why when a lot of people, when are faced with electrosensitivity and they do all the blocking out of the electromagnetic radiation, they're still not getting a solution, right? Their electrosensitivity still stays. This is because of this lingering effect. And this takes place in that subtle realm that we talked about. So if we want to have a complete solution, we have to address this electrosmog, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Sounds great. Okay, so we set the stage here for getting at the deeper levels, and now let's jump into the principles. So,
Well, actually, if I could take a minute, I first wanted to give us a prime example of this electrosmog and somebody that found a way to deal with it. And this is Dr. Ibrahim Karim, who was an architect, and actually then he dedicated his life to developing in science to measure these subtle realms and also affect them through the use of shapes. And about 20 years ago, Dr. Karim was called by a town in Switzerland, Hamburg, and they were having a lot of problems because Swiss Telecom had put antennas in the church of the town, cell phone antennas. And what they started to notice was that people started developing serious electro stress symptoms. The other thing they started to notice is that the birds were no longer in that area. And then the animals that couldn't flee, they started seeing things like a lot of miscarriages. And then actually when they processed the animals, they started to notice tumors in the meat that were forming. So Dr. Ibrahim Karim was called in to address that issue. Now, one of the things, many of us are focused on the physical layer, but many of the symptoms that people were having were in the mental and emotional plane, like irritability, nervousness, depression, trouble falling asleep, exhaustion, weakness of memory, headaches, migraines, allergies. These were all symptoms that people were having, and that sometimes the linkage is not made with EMF, right? And when Dr. Karim implemented his solutions, they saw an elimination of of all those symptoms. And he didn't do it by shielding. He actually did it by using shapes to harmonize the energy. So for me, that piece, and we'll put the link in the description, you can read more on the biogeometry website because it's scientifically documented. And then the Swiss government and telecom actually came out and acknowledged that they had a problem and that it had been resolved now. So for me, that's really a turning point because there was an acknowledgement of those subtle roams and then the electrosmog that we were referring to.
No, I'm so glad you shared that. It's great to know there's different approaches to this, and that's what this is all about, is helping people find their own approach. Like everybody needs an EMF solution today because we're all getting bombarded. All you need to know that you're getting bombarded is to turn your computer or your cell phone on and seek to connect to your wireless network. And that's when you find out that every wireless network within a close proximity to you is going through your body too. It's going through your equipment, it's going through your body. And that's just one part of electric. I mean, people are plugging in beds now. I can't understand that one, but I guess people are finding comfort in it. I just want to sleep on organic materials and be as natural as I can be. So speaking of which, the first principle, it has to be natural. When you go to make your EMF solution, the concept that we've talked about is, do you want something that plugs into the wall and creates a solution, or do you want something that uses natural principles? So could you comment on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, first of all, the electrical grid is at the root of a lot of the EMF issues that we have now. So we don't want to rely on that, right? But also there's a lot of scalar and other solutions that use electricity. Now, if those subtle roams that we just talked about are not taking into account, we might create a certain effect on the physical or even on the electromagnetic, but we could be aggravating the issue on all the subtle layers. And I mean, they've actually tested a lot of these solutions and they noticed that, yeah, they had some results on the physical and the electromagnetic, but in the subtle realms, they were still causing electrosmog and disharmony. And then we're actually, solving one issue, but making the root of it worse, because it's really the subtle realm that gives rise to the physical manifestations. So just addressing the physical is not good enough. And overall, it's always been my philosophy. Nature is like the ultimate harmonizing, balancing principle that we have. So for me, the closer something comes to nature, the more powerful it is. And we always want to stick to nature's principles and be in harmony with nature's principles, rather than trying to set up man-made problems with then man-made solutions. We want to go back and mimic nature as close as we can.
Okay, great. So we have the issue of nature, the principle of nature being first, and then I think there might be a little bit more to say about that when you go to the second one, which is that there's a distinction between passive and active technologies. And while you answer that, could you give us a little of the principles of what nature would look like? Because we know what it looks like to plug into the grid, but what does it look like to have a natural EMF solution? And I think that's part of the passive active technologies answer.
Yeah, I mean, if we look at the subtle building block of nature, everything is a toroidal field, like the donut shape, all the way from the electron to the universe itself. It's this toroidal shape. You see it in an apple. This field is around the tree. If you look at HeartMath, who did a lot of studies about the heart and the field of the heart, it's a toroidal field. So they're all toroidal fields that are linked together. So that is basically the geometry of nature is in that toroidal field, which is an active field, right? It always moves. and it keeps circulating. And that's why when we have solutions that create a toroidal field to harmonize, they are dynamic, right? I mean, we can use certain crystals or shungite or whatever, or more passive solutions, but those then always, you know, they need to be cleared because they will accumulate the energy and accumulate the bad energy, if you want to call it that, detrimental energy, but then that needs to be discharged and needs to get removed. That's why with a lot of the passive solutions, you got to make sure you clear them. And there's no issue with that, but I don't know about you, but when I have a solution like that in the beginning, I'm very diligent about clearing it, and then over time it just goes out the window because it's always something that we need to do, and we all have busy lives and we forget about it, and then our solution is no longer, you know, efficient for us. So that's why we would always prefer a more dynamic solution that is self-clearing, that doesn't need that, knowing our human nature.
Beautiful. All right, principle number 3, let's go back to connectivity and these bodies. I love this one because this is the edge of where I'm learning right now and where my sensitivities are expanding. So, you know, I've done so much in the physical and the emotional, clearing for decades and, you know, getting myself to be a nicer guy by getting at the emotions. But then there's a part that's like exhausting, and there are more important energy fields than the ones I've been working in that I need to harmonize with them. And I'm beginning to understand that the ones that I've been working on are more like self-contained personal energy fields. So can you talk about the concepts of the bodies of who we are relative to their connectivity?
Absolutely. And we know this from the spiritual traditions. They say everything is interconnected. And we are not separate from the earth, right? Traditional science, as we are taught in school or in university, treats us as a separate entity being dropped in an environment, but actually that's not the case. If we go and look at like the spiritual, like the emotional, the mental plane, these are collective planes. We are not being dropped in the earth. We are part of Earth's body. There is a direct relationship between my ability to breathe and the tree that's over there, right? This is all part. We are an open energy system that is continuously exchanging with the environment. So we are basically being taught that our emotions and our thoughts are just within us, and that's absolutely not the case. There is an interaction between the individual and the collective, and between the collective and the individual. And we've all experienced this. If we walk into a room where people might be gossiping or are negative, we feel affected too. And then we also have seen the opposite when there might be some disharmony and we walk in and we are in our heart and have this harmonizing energy that everything settles down. So we have to understand we are not separate of our environment. We are one with our environment. Now, the logical conclusion from this is that if we just address our separate entity, but not the environment, we can never get healthy because we are connected to our environment. So in order to have truly a solution that gets at the root cause, we have to address the collective and the environment too, of which we are a part.
Yeah, beautiful. All right, so let's talk about 24/7, 365. And the concept here, this is our 4th principle, is that the toxicity of this world has just become pervasive. It's all the time. And we're getting bombarded in food, air, water, through, you know, electromagnetic spectrum in ways we can't even imagine. It seems like it's coming in every direction. And so talk about this principle of having something that is part of your team, your support, your solution all the time. And
yes, I mean, we have communities that are really focused on not having any cell phones, not having any Wi-Fi, and trying to live in their bubble, but it's not feasible, right? Because there's a proliferation of these technologies that is ever rising, meaning even if you're in your community, in your home, doing the best to harmonize and doing your best to dealing with that, you're still a part of the larger environment, and things are being done that are outside of your control. Now, even if you would have an environment that is pristine somewhere in a jungle, we still go into the world. People go to work. So we really need to have a solution that helps us 24/7 and also works no matter where we are at, right? We can create a sanctuary at home, but then if you drive into work and you're surrounded by 5G and Wi-Fi and you don't have the ability to bring something with you that creates that harmonious environment, then you might be doing good at home, but then the moment you leave your home, you start degrading, right? So we need a solution everywhere.
Yeah, and I recently had the privilege of living pretty off grid. Actually, I was off grid for about 6 months on a farm, and you know, there's still satellites going above at a regularity that I've never seen before. They're just, it's like a constant stream of them, and then there's still planes, with chemtrails coming off of them. So even out there, like it falls from the sky. It's pervasive.
Yes, and that's why we cannot fight that by separating ourselves from it. The only way, because our society has chosen as electromagnetic waves to be the carrier of information, and we live in an information-driven world. So that's only going to increase. That's why shielding doesn't work either, because it's there and it's ever increasing. That's why we need to focus on harmonizing. We can look at as all those technologies as being a carrier wave. Right now, it's carrying information that is detrimental to life. With solutions that harmonize, we can actually flip that to where the carrier wave is still there, but instead it's carrying information, energy that's beneficial to life.
Beautiful. All right, let's look at the fifth principle for your EMF solution, which is the ease of implementation and maintenance. I know I'm busy. There's literally too many things that I care about that I can't focus on all of them in a day, a week, or a month. So talk a little bit about this principle of ease of implementation and maintenance to keep it simple.
Yeah, there's many solutions out there. One of them I really love is biogeometry that was created by Dr. Ibrahim Karim, but it's not simple. You have to really dive into it and understand what you're doing to get the effects that you want and that you desire. So then you either have to hire a professional that implements it for you, or you have to learn how to do it yourself. But then we're also in a dynamic environment where constantly everything is changing. So that will need adjusting over time for the solution that you implemented and was effective at that point in time to remain effective. And then you also have other solutions where you do not need that skill necessarily to implement it, but then they have the downfall that they need to be maintained. Like we talked about earlier, they got to be cleared, or they even need to be sent back to the manufacturer, every so often to be recharged. So ideally, we have a solution that we can just put anywhere and don't require knowledge of how to implement, that is dynamic and not only works now, but also when things change. And that doesn't require any maintenance, because maintenance is a hassle. We have to mail it back, then we're not protected, and then it comes back, and then we might have to do it again.
Yeah. Okay, great. Let's move on to principle number 6. So the principle here is that EMFs just keep increasing. And so is it okay to get something that like holds us at this status quo and is like a personal protection, or what about that?
Yeah, well, as I was mentioning earlier, there's a continuous proliferation of these technologies. So what works today might not work tomorrow. So we need something that is more powerful as these new technologies come out that might be even more detrimental. So that's one thing that we have to make sure of in our solution, that we address that, right?
Yeah, I know as they upgraded the early stages of the internet and Wi-Fi connectivity, and they did like 3G, there were like advances that I could understand, that my life got better because I could watch a video streaming on the bandwidth now, right? But when we went from 4G to 5G, I did not consent and I did not see a benefit, right?
Mhm.
It seemed more like it was all about pollution than that. I don't remember any benefit to using my phone or my technology to 5G coming out. And I can think of a lot of places where I've read articles about, you talked about birds, like, entire species just not showing up where they used to show up on Earth. And the coincident factor is a ton of proliferation of 5G in that area, as well as, a lot of disease. Like this planet looks sick in a lot of ways. So
Yeah, and there's many distortions beyond EMF too, right? So just having a status quo in EMF is not good enough, because our food, our water, the air has toxins, which then degrades our living being, our energy system. So ideally, we want a solution that for EMF that doesn't just keep us at the status quo, but that actually raises our energy and increases our health, and also that of the environment. As we are talked, we have to become stewards for the environment, and we need to have solutions that actually make the environment better, recognizing that we are interconnected with all living organisms. And if we don't improve their health, we're never going to see a change in that downwards momentum.
yeah, and you just jumped into the seventh principle before we named it, which is perfect. And that's the idea that you can't separate EMF from the whole environment. And
Yeah.
so an EMF solution isn't a whole solution, and it's not going to scale to bringing us the life that we want.
Yeah, exactly. And also, it's not just our body that's affected by the EMF, right? But let's say you buy nice organic food from an organic farm, it gets harvested, and then you drive through this field that basically zaps the life force out of it. Going back to the people in Hamburg, what they said they felt was like they felt like their energy was getting sucked out of them, right? So imagine that happening for your food, for your water, for your air. Then those are the things that are supposed to nourish us. And now we're putting them, into our being, and have either no benefits at all or detrimental benefits to where our health gets worse. So for me, a great EMF solution addresses the individual, the environment, and all living organisms and all that we interact with.
Yeah, right on. And that brings us to our final principle, which is spiritual connection. So take it home, Nico. Tell us about spiritual connection connected to EMF solutions and how people can apply this to the solutions they're choosing.
Yeah, well, we are spiritual beings having a physical experience. And when I was talking earlier about the subtle realms, the meta physical, those are an integral part of our being, the vitality, the emotional, the mental, and the spiritual plane. So ultimately, as a species, for us to come out of this downward spiral that we're in is by realizing this interconnectedness with everything, but also that we're more than just a physical organism, that we are spiritual beings. And if we have a solution or an environment that really allows us to connect more with the spiritual plane, which we then pass through all the planes, through the vitality, emotional, mental. If we do that, we become not only stronger, but also we start seeing the world in a different way. We start experiencing the interconnectedness of everything. It's just not something that we learned, but we actually start experiencing this. And then we can actually start acting from a place where we are not harming any other part of creation, where we as a living being become a harmonizing influence, not only on the physical, but also on all these subtle planes that shape our physical reality. And we, in and of in ourselves, when we become more spiritual and when we raise our vibration, as we become more harmonious, we become a harmonious influence of all of life, everybody around us. And that's ultimately where I see when humanity comes through that level of consciousness, that's where the real solution is. Because then we're no longer going to take decisions or actions that create this harmony, but we're always coming from that harmonious place, and everybody around us get harmonized. And as we harmonize individually, we harmonize the collective. As the collective becomes harmonized, more individuals become harmonized. And now we have an upwards spiral of more harmony and coming back in alignment with nature.
That upward spiral is what we're all about, people. That is that what we're focused on. We're Patter and Nico. We're from the Cosmic Tower Project, and we want to hear from you on this video. Does this help you come into greater alignment and empowerment and to know how to make choices for yourself? Or did we miss something? Tell us below the video. What are your comments? Did this really move you forward, or do you have more questions? And we will stay attentive to those comments and be happy to answer them for you. Thanks for taking the time to listen to us. Nico, thanks for your preparation and getting ready for this important video.
Thank you.
And yeah, we look forward to seeing you all around. Take care.